If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of 3. Join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth and postnatal recovery, helping you have a wonderful pregnancy and afterbirth experience. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Well, hi there. Welcome to episode number 13. My name is Kath Bequee from FitNest Mama, which is an online community of pregnant and postnatal women. They have access to Pilates classes and resources to help them prepare for pregnancy and childbirth and have a confident and empowered afterbirth recovery where they can get back to doing what they love with confidence and a bubble by their side. So this is a solo episode and it is all about pelvic girdle pain. I'm going to talk you through this really common issue during pregnancy and give you a few quick tips which will hopefully help you out and feel more comfortable. I'm going to talk you through my story with pelvic girdle pain and I'll chat about what pelvic girdle pain is and what might commonly irritate the pain, and then I will give you my few top tips as to how to manage the pain and when you should seek professional advice for that one-to-one support, and so much more. So let's get started. But before we do jump into this episode, I just want to let you know that there is a 7-day free trial that's available for FitNest Mama. In this 7-day trial, you will be able to try one of our weekly live Pilates classes and do as many on-demand classes as you'd like. You can binge listen to guest expert speakers discussing topics including hypnobirthing, induction, mindset, sex after childbirth, cesarean scar massage, and more. So there's heaps of Q&A sessions on all sorts of topics such as abdominal muscle separation, pregnancy-related pelvic pain, and more. So all you need to do is head to fitnestmama.com/free. All right, so pelvic girdle pain. So ladies, this is the first time I haven't written out this episode at all in the past because this, as you know, this is a relatively new podcast and it's always a little bit nerve-wracking doing a solo episode, and I've pretty much written it out. So this time, I don't have time. I've got to pick up kids from school in 45 minutes and I was really hoping to get this podcast recorded today. So going to wing it. So let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram and let me know what you think of this winging it style. So I'm going to tell you about my story with pelvic girdle pain. So during my second pregnancy, so my first pregnancy was great. I had no issues with pain. I was really active. I went for long walks. I did lots of Pilates classes. I did lots of different things and loved it. I won't talk about childbirth and the afterbirth period. That's a whole different story. But the actual pregnancy, I had very few issues at all. I was really lucky. However, with my second pregnancy, there was a 22-month gap between my first and my second children. And we bought a house. I think as a lot of people tend to do during pregnancy, there always seems to be these big life changes that I hear about. Anyway, so we bought a house and we ended up settling and moving when I was about 28 weeks pregnant. And I was really careful. I had a toddler. There's always extra demands on the body when you've already got a toddler and you're pregnant as well. You know, I wasn't silly. I didn't move any boxes and I didn't do any heavy lifting. And I tried to be sensible, knowing what I know. However, something happened. I know I was doing more than I usually do, pottering in boxes. Don't know what it was, but one day I just could not stand up from sitting. And for the next few months, it was a real struggle. I was a physio. I worked in a women's health clinic at the time, and I really even struggled to physically get myself into the clinic for treatment from my colleagues. You know, the act of getting my toddler in and out of the car. At that time, I had to wrestle. She refused to get into her car seat. Oh, there were so many things where I'd eventually get to the appointment, have some treatment, and then I'd have to walk back to my car in the car park and drive back home. And I remember distinctly being so exhausted after attempting to seek treatment that I ended up not having that hands-on treatment. I just put it in the too hard basket. And it was actually, that was the point that was a really big driver towards creating FitNest Mama and creating resources and online support which women can access from their home, because I personally know how hard it can be to get out the house when you've got a toddler and you're pregnant, or perhaps you've got a newborn baby as well. That's my story. So behind pelvic girdle pain. So I know how debilitating it can be. I know how it can be impossible to look after your toddler when you have pelvic girdle pain. We had to get extra care from family. We're lucky to help out. We had extra childcare days because I just physically couldn't look after my toddler at the time. So it was really stressful couple of months. So let's chat pelvic girdle pain. Let's chat about what it is, and I'm going to give you a few tips that will hopefully help you out. It's called pelvic girdle pain generally. It used to be commonly called pelvic instability, and you do still hear that term used, but that term generally isn't used as much anymore, which I'm quite happy about, because thinking that you've got an unstable pelvis, it can be a bit scary. If you say, I've got pelvic instability, like the thoughts that go through my mind is that my pelvis is going to crack open. Like, it's not a good thought, I think, when you're in pain and discomfort, to be saying that you've got pelvic instability. It's a bit of a scary concept. And it's also not really true. The pelvis is inherently really stable. It's one of the most stable joints of the body. And there may be a few extra degrees of movement that occur within some of the joints of the pelvis, but it's actually not unstable. It is one of the most stable joints of the body. So that is why I do believe the term pelvic instability isn't used as much these days, which I think is great. So generally, it's pelvic girdle pain, and this can include the pain that is commonly felt at the front of the pelvis, the pubic symphysis area. And this term can also encompass the pain that's felt at the back of the pelvis. So this might be along your sacroiliac joint, so along one side where your sacrum meets your pelvis, or perhaps you've got some discomfort along both sides of your sacrum at the back. So I think that's a really good point to get out there first. Your pelvis isn't unstable. It's not going to fall apart when you're walking, and there may well be some irritation along some of the joints, so which can cause inflammation, and then that inflammation is what is thought to cause the pain. The commonly irritated activities that often I hear from my patients and members that stir up the pain can include activities like single leg activities, stairs, walking up and down stairs, perhaps getting in and out of the car, or single leg activities such as getting dressed when you stand on one leg, or sometimes even like pushing the fridge veggie door closed with one foot can be really uncomfortable. And unfortunately, walking can also end up being quite irritating to that pelvic girdle area. So walking, well, it's not actually a single leg activity, walking per se, but for some reason, walking can definitely flare up the pelvic area, and I don't feel it's an amazing exercise at all. If you have developed pelvic girdle pain, walking may not be in your best interest, which is interesting because we all know it's sad because it's so easy, right, as a form of exercise, and walking's great for helping to manage gestational diabetes, and it's simple, it doesn't require any equipment, and it's time effective, but unfortunately it can flare up the pelvis. So I'll go into walking in a little bit more detail in a tick, but just because if the recommendation is to not walk for a little bit of time to help if you're trying to help settle down the pain, then we can definitely substitute it with different activities. So I will go into that. So the common activities which might irritate your pelvic girdle pain might be the stairs, the single leg activities, sitting to standing, walking. And then if your pelvic girdle pain is a bit worse, then sometimes any sorts of movements can be really uncomfortable. Rolling in bed is another common one. And having pain at nighttime as well. So that's a really interesting one. Sometimes women say to me, I only get pain at nighttime. It's a tricky one, this, because often if you think you're only getting pain at nighttime, then the issue is perhaps your mattress or your sleeping position. But that's not what I think is happening. So as I said at the start, pelvic girdle pain, often the pain is arising as a result of inflammation and that irritation of those joints. And the thing with inflammation is if it's getting irritated during the day with certain activities that you're doing, you might not feel discomfort during the day, but you might be feeling the pain at nighttime. And that might be when it's rearing its head, but it's not as a result of, it might not be as a result of what's happening at nighttime, but more perhaps what you're doing, what activities are you doing during the day that might be making it a bit sore at nighttime. So I like to think of it, if you're getting nighttime pain occasionally, that perhaps it's a bit of a warning sign. Maybe we need to just think about what's happening during the day and trying to lessen the load on the pelvis just to help nip it in the bud, reduce that inflammation so it doesn't start to get worse and worse. And with pelvic girdle pain, I do find that managing it early on, I find is so much easier than managing the pelvic pain once the cycle's sort of set up, and if it's quite severe and hard, it can be really hard to get on top of. So if you are getting little niggles and aches and pains here and there, it's great that you're listening to this episode because you might just be able to implement one or two things which might make all the difference and not cause any further issues, fingers crossed, moving forwards. Okay, so why might one person develop pelvic girdle pain and then another person doesn't? We don't know too much about all this, but we do know it's not just as a result of what activities you do and don't do. So I feel that we can sometimes beat ourselves up about this if you do develop pelvic girdle pain. I know I did. I felt like it was my fault. I felt like I'd done too much. But you know what? Sometimes there's just things that are unavoidable that might not have had any bearing whatsoever in what's happened. So the things we perhaps can't control, genetics or what's happening with your hormones at the time, what's the position of the baby as well. I hear quite commonly where women's pelvic girdle pain reduces dramatically overnight and they swear that their baby has changed position. The things that are harder to control is what's your workload like? Have you got a toddler in the house and you are finding it harder to rest? Are you up on your feet all day and you're not able to put your feet up and take 5 minutes to rest and relax? Yeah, so it's not all a matter of something that you did that caused the issue. Sometimes it's a combination of factors as well to take into consideration. So let's say you do feel a bit achy at the front of your pelvis or at the back of your pelvis and you're suspecting that you've got pelvic girdle pain. The first thing I'd say is if you're in discomfort, don't put up with the pain. Go and see a physio, women's health physio. Go and get it assessed. Go and get that personalised one-on-one treatment because we never want to put up with pain. And as I said earlier, it's always good to nip it in the bud and try to get onto it sooner rather than later. Maybe you don't feel like you need to see someone for that one-on-one help, and maybe you just want to try a few different strategies first. So my first number one recommendation would be to try to rest more. And when I say rest, I don't just mean sit down. Let's try to get a bit more horizontal rest. So pop your feet up, lie down on a chair, like lie on your back, and try to rest. And I remember this was really impossible. Again, if you got a toddler in the house, as soon as I would lie down, my toddler would be climbing all over me. So this is easier said than done. But even if it's just 2 or 5 minutes in the afternoon, for example, if your pelvic pain is flaring up in the evenings when you're standing on your feet and you're doing, it's the crazy hour with dinner, bath, on all the rest, maybe at that stage for 5 minutes, you could have it lie down and read a quick 5-minute book with your toddler lying down or whatever it is. Just quick 5 minutes in that crazy time in the afternoon might make all the difference in terms of helping with your pain levels for the rest of the evening. So rest, reducing that workload on the pelvis, reducing that inflammation. Resting can help for so many different reasons. Okay, number 2 tip, top tip for pelvic girdle pain would be to avoid walking long distances. So again, some women walk with no issues whatsoever for the whole length of their pregnancy, and that's fantastic. But if you are starting to get some pelvic girdle pain, it might be worth reducing how long you're walking for or how regularly you're walking for. And this doesn't necessarily mean for the whole remainder of your pregnancy, but even if it's just for the next week or two to see if you can settle down that pain, settle down that inflammation and nip it in the bud. And then you might be able to build up your walking slowly again. So avoiding walking long distances. And so we'd want to substitute this with a different form of exercise because obviously walking has so many health benefits. Maybe you want to walk in the pool if the pool is the right place for you to exercise. Maybe you could substitute it with some home-based workouts or Pilates classes or FitNest Pilates classes. So we don't want to just cut out walking altogether, but rather let's substitute the aggravating activity with a non-aggravating activity. So we still want to keep your strength and your endurance and everything up if we can. My third top tip would be to try a few self-management strategies. So I'm going to mention a few right now. They might not work for everyone, or you might decide one really works for you, but the other one hasn't been as effective. So I'm just going to mention them all so that you're aware of a few things that you could perhaps look into in some more detail or, find out some more information about. First thing to talk about is the use of ice or heat. So the jury is out. Some people recommend just icing for pelvic pain, and then some people tend to recommend just heating.
This episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months. Yes, that's 9 months. They also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit www.babybeeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, FITBEE 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply.
It's a tricky one, and again, evidence isn't great in terms of telling us which way we should go. I'll just give you some of my thoughts on it so that you can see what works for you. Right, so icing can be really effective if the issue is caused by inflammation. So as I said before, what we're thinking is happening with pelvic girdle pain is that there's inflammation around those pelvic joints that we talked about. So for many different reasons, there's a little bit of irritation on those joints, which is causing some pain. So if we can ice it, ice is thought to have an anti-inflammatory effect. So if we can put ice on the area, that is thought to help to reduce pain. And for some people, it really works so well. The thing is, ice doesn't penetrate that deeply into the body. So personally, and from my clients and the members, personally, I feel icing works really well if you've got that pubic symphysis pain, so that pain at the front of your pelvis. However, perhaps it's not as effective if you've got that sacroiliac joint pain, the pain around your bottom area, your bum area. And the reason is the sacroiliac joint is often covered with a thick muscle, your gluteal muscles. And for the ice to actually be able to penetrate that deeply into where the joint line is, I don't know if that's happening. So my recommendation would be definitely to try ice first. So wrap an ice pack, whether or not it's a pack of frozen peas or whatever you've got in the freezer, wrap it in a piece of cloth because we don't want ice directly on your skin. And then place it either on your pubic symphysis or on your SIJ at the back and place it there for 15 minutes or so. And this combined with that horizontal rest might work wonders, and it might be all that you need to just nip it in the bud. And I find if women ice during the day, those that are having difficulty with pain at nighttime also benefit at nighttime. So if you can get that inflammation down during the day, you might find it has a flow-on effect and you don't get that nighttime pain. So this is also something that, very low risk. Why not give it a try? Why not see if it works and see how it works and try it for a few days? Don't just try it once and say, nah, that didn't work for me. You really need to be consistent. Try icing every few hours during the day if you can. So imagine if you're icing every 2 to 3 hours and you're having a 15-minute lie down every 2 to 3 hours, a horizontal rest, or if you're working, you might have to be sitting when you're icing. Then that in itself is a lot of extra rest during the day and the icing for the inflammation, and you never know, that might really help things along. Okay, so if the icing isn't working on your SIJ area, your sacroiliac joint area, as I said, it is a bit deeper inside the pelvis and you've got your gluteal muscles surrounding it. So if it's not working, then perhaps try heat, and heat will do more of the job of relaxing those glute muscles, which might be feeling a bit stiff or tight or tender. So if you can relax those glute muscles, the heat isn't actually going to penetrate as deep into where the SIJ is, like the joint line, but it might help to relax those outer muscles. So it's not really getting to the source of the inflammation, but it's helping with the secondary tight muscles. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's try some icing or heating. The next self-management strategy that might be helpful is spiky ball. I love my spiky ball and I loved it when I had pelvic pain. So if you're not sure what spiky ball massage to do, come and join me for a 7-day trial inside FitNest Mama, or check out my Instagram posts. It's somewhere a few months ago I did a post on it. But generally what I recommend is getting that spiky ball and popping it on your glutes, your bottom area, and going up and down a wall with the spiky ball on that area. So it's like that self-massage that you're giving yourself, and it can be just great. Or if you want a bit of a deeper massage, you could put the ball on the floor. It sounds a bit weird describing this in a podcast. It's really such a visual thing. So I might do a post on it in the near future. But yeah, send me a DM and I can direct you to the posts that I'm talking about. So icing, heating, and spiky ball massage. Some stretches can be really helpful, some glute stretches, so sitting down, putting one foot on the other knee and gently leaning forwards, and some stretches with your upper back area too. I do tend to find the mums that I see that do develop pelvic girdle pain, they're not just stiff and sore around the pelvis, but we want to avoid all that secondary stiffness happening. So doing some open book stretches and stretching that upper back area. There are some beautiful stretches you can do along the whole spine, which will help to prevent that stiffening up even more. Okay, so I feel like I've missed a self-management strategy. Icing, lifting is the other one. Oh, lifting is so tricky. So as I said, for some pregnant women, they can keep on lifting their toddler with no issues throughout their pregnancy. But if you're having pelvic girdle pain, it might be wise to try to reduce how often or how much you're lifting heavier things. So I think it's quite easy to reduce the day-to-day lifting of laundry baskets. You could just put half a load into the laundry basket instead of a full load. Shopping, hopefully you can handball that if you have to lift heavy shopping. But your toddler is one that it's hard to handball and it's hard to reduce. I get it. So lifting a toddler, yes, it can be tricky during pregnancy if you've got pelvic girdle pain, but also when you've got a newborn baby. I recommend all my mamas that come home with a newborn baby, it doesn't matter if you've had a cesarean delivery or a vaginal delivery, I do highly recommend you try to avoid lifting anything heavier than your baby for a good 6 weeks. And this is a whole podcast episode unto itself, but if you can try to get into a few habits during pregnancy in terms of encouraging your toddler to be as independent as possible, we're safe to be so. For example, having your cuddles when you're sitting on a couch, or getting some steps to use in the bathroom so they can wash their own hands without you having to pick them up, or get some steps up to the change table so they can do the majority of it themselves. Yeah, it might be worth brainstorming that with your partner and seeing what you can implement and what you can do now, because that might definitely help with your pelvic girdle pain, but it might also help with that postnatal recovery in those first 6 weeks. And I do think it's kinder on the toddler if you get into a bit of a new habit when you're pregnant before there's a newborn in the house, because I know my toddler wasn't impressed when I said to them, sorry, I can't lift you, honey. I can only, if you're saying you can only lift your newborn baby, but I can't lift you, I know they probably wouldn't be that impressed if you just threw that on them. So preparing them as much as possible and getting them used to the whole concept that you're not going to lift them in those first 6 weeks after childbirth might be really helpful. Okay, so I know when I stop recording, I'm going to think of something else here. As I said, I'm doing this podcast on the fly. I've got to go to school pickup soon. But those few that I have just mentioned, they're relatively easy to implement, and I would love to hear, if you do this consistently over a few days, what has it done to your pelvic girdle pain? How has it benefited you? How has it helped, or how has it not helped? Let me know. Send me a DM on Instagram. And if what I have said doesn't work, or if the pain is getting worse, or if you've got any pins and needles and numbness or shooting pain down your legs, or any issues with incontinence or leaking, or any concerns at all, please do go and speak to your doctor and go and get some treatment. So go see a women's health physio. They will be able to offer that personalised advice. They might recommend a specific type of belt, pelvic girdle support belt, or abdominal support like Tubi Grip. They might be able to help with some soft tissue work, give you gentle stretches and personalised exercises that you can do in the comfort of your home. So that's it in a nutshell. There's heaps of exercises that you can do to help with pelvic girdle pain. I do really think it's a time to rest and prevent any extra irritation on those pelvic girdle joints. If you want more advice, come and see me inside FitNest Mama. I've got a whole module on pelvic girdle pain because it's so common. I go through a whole lot of self-management strategies, and I go through modifications to all of our Pilates classes are pelvic girdle pain friendly, and I talk through modifications so that you finish the class feeling invigorated and not exhausted, and you finish the class feeling good and not in more pain. And that is always your goal. So it doesn't matter where you're going for help or what exercise you're doing. You don't want to be exercising and pushing into pain. You want to feel good at the end of your class. That's it, ladies. That's my quick tips on pelvic girdle pain. So before I sign off, do remember my team, and I will be putting together the show notes for this episode with all the links at fitnessmama.com. And that includes how to access the free 7-day trial of FitNest Mama. I'd love to hear from you. Do you have pelvic girdle pain, or did you during pregnancy? So send me a DM at FitNest Mama. Have a fabulous day, everyone, and I look forward to you joining me next week for another episode of the FitNest Mama podcast. Thanks for listening to the FitNest Mama podcast, brought to you by the FitNest Mama freebies found at www.fitnestmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at FitNest Mama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer, materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis or treatment. I'll see you soon.